In today's episode of our photography review show, we're gonna review images from 23 photographers. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. This is our final show in January 2022. For those who don't know me, my name is Jakub and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been reviewing photos of my friends and colleagues, and it's something we decided to offer to our photography community here at Clever Photographer. Now it's been very popular, we've been doing it for over 6 months now, and we received hundreds of images from hundreds of photographers. So after that we had to do a little bit of limitation on the number of pictures we can accept. So for quite some time now we accept 1 to 2 images per week per photographer, and also we take the show every week and divide it between 2 or 3 parts depending on how many images we receive. Usually we start by landscape photographers, then we look at the mixed team photography, and then we look at the rest of the photographers in the 3 or 2 different parts. Now, before we jump into the actual reviewing, we have 2 things I want to share with you. First one is about our Facebook photography group. It's called Clever Photographer Academy. You can just head to Facebook, search for that, Clever Photographer Academy, and it's a place where we talk all things photography. We have lots of photography fun there. We review your photos throughout the week. We answer photography questions, and we also run photography competitions there. So it's a lots of fun. And if you haven't joined us yet, make sure you head to Facebook, search for Clever Photographer Academy, and join us today. Now the second thing we need to do, we need to look at the last week's photographer of the week. So let's do that right now. And here we go with one of your favorite part of the show, where we're gonna introduce you to our photographer of the week. Now this week's photographer of the week is Jakub Wilson, and he is based in West Palm Beach in Florida. So the reason why we went for Jakub is because we love his aviation photography. Right now I'm looking at his Instagram feed right here, and you can see Jakub does lots of aviation. He also does a little bit of landscape photography and a little bit of night long exposure photography. However, it's really the aviation which really caught our eye, because some of the pictures are absolutely incredible, and some of the captures, like this one with the explosion in front of it, is super cool. We love the level of the details, the sharpness, the movement, the capture of the movement, and everything just put together. It really works. We think that Jakub's portfolio is excellent, and we love his work all the way through. So if you want to see and learn more about Jakub's portfolio and Jakub's work, you can visit him on his Instagram page right here. Maybe tag him or give him a shout. And also another good place to go and learn more about him is to visit his portfolio website, and again the address is right here. So Jakub, we love your pictures. Keep shooting. Thank you very much for joining us, and once more, congratulations. And the same for all of you folks. If you want to become our photographer of the week and be presented on this spot, just like all the rest of our social media and newsletter, all you need to do is to head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/review, find the dates there, upload your photos, and wait for the results every week on Monday. It's a lots of fun, and even if you don't become the photographer of the week, we definitely help you to keep moving your photography skills forward. So that's this part, and now let's jump into the reviewing. And now here we are with the third and final part of today's photography review show. And in this part we're going to be looking at macro photographers, portrait photographers, travel photographers, and wildlife photographers. So we have 8 photographers to look at, and we're going to jump straight into it. But before we're going to do that, I wanted to remind you to please make sure that you like this video, leave us a comment below, and also subscribe to our channel so we can keep creating content like this. So anyway, we are here back in the Adobe Lightroom. That's what we use for our reviews, and we have 8 photographers to look at. So starting with Joseph Feher. Joseph, little bit of macro photography here. 2 completely different approaches. Now this one is very natural with lovely warm light, and this one is very much like a studio shot captured with a white background. Both of them lovely, just 2 different approaches. So let's jump straight into it. Right here, let's have a look if we have any camera details, and we do. So in this case, it was a Panasonic G80 with your 60mm macro lens. And let's look at the settings. So ISO 400, 60mm f4, 1/640th of the second. So as a setting goes, it seems quite all right. Let's kind of zoom in and see. There is no noise, or not very much visible noise, coming from the ISO 400. So well done on you there. Now the sharpness, obviously focusing on the center of the flower, works very nice. There are recently kind of two approaches and trends when it comes to macro photography, and one is this very kind of focused, locally focused zoom. So as you can see, that's your case, where you really just pick one part of the image, keep that sharp, and everything else turned itself to this kind of soft surroundings. In some cases it works, in some it doesn't. In this case it works, I think, very nicely, and it actually helps the overall composition. The light is very nice, soft, really kind of illuminate the whole flower, creating lovely little shadow areas in these parts, and all in all, it's actually lovely capture. Now, moving on this one, unfortunately, there is no camera details on this one. However, at least from what we can see. So obviously, this is the kind of second approach from what I was just talking about. And this is the case where the whole flower, or pretty much most of it, is in focus, and only the background gets really blurry. And in this case, it works really well, actually. So it creates separation for what wasn't the greatest color contrast. Quite often, like in this case, you have the colors with the white, creating great contrast, creating a lovely depth. Where in this case, where pretty much the color, except the red, the rest of it probably has a similar shades as the background, that's where the separation really comes across very handy. Now, when I zoom in, I see a fair bit of noise here. It's mostly kind of grainy noise. I don't see any color noise, or maybe just a bits of it. So I'm assuming maybe the ISO was a little bit higher on this one. However, when I look at the whole flower, it seems to be quite nice, sharp. The glow and the different kind of light rays seems to be working really well here. It's a nice mixture of different shadows and highlights. I think the exposure is really lovely too. So when you put it all together, it's really nice. So the only thing I would be looking at is the noise, and you must know yourself, based on the light conditions, on what you could have done maybe a little bit differently. Anyway, sticking to it, talking about composition, I think this is very lovely. Obviously, keeping the whole flower in with the whole kind of movement, creating a really nice flow. The depth of field created with the blur or softness at the back, I think works really well. There are, again, different ways of how you can approach this, but when you're going for the background with the similar natural colors, I think it's better to blur it more rather than less. So I think that worked very well too. And all in all, the kind of movement and everything with the contrast of the color here between the red and background just works. So very well done here. Now on this one, artistically and composition wise, again, it's the approach number one, where you just keep a center part of it in focus and everything else get a little bit softer and blurry. I think it works very well here. I think if you would have left a little bit more space on each side, it would be a little bit nicer. I'm a big fan of either cropping in, so showing the viewer that was something which was intentional, or leaving a little bit of space aside, which would be helpful. I quite actually like this piece here because I think it adds a little bit of the depth, but even if it wouldn't have been there, it would probably still look cool because you get another flower behind and the whole thing just works together. It's a nice example of the white background. I think it works quite cool here. The saturation is very lovely, and really when you look at the picture, it makes you feel a certain way, so I think it works. Now when it comes to post-processing, this one is spot on. I think the natural but very powerful color here really work. The background is nicely done. It's clean, it's white. The white balance is very nice. The shadows, I think, very nicely done here as well, and the contrast is very balanced. So all in all, lovely capture. Now on this one as well, again, a different approach. Maybe you could be looking at seeing how you could maybe remove a little bit of the noise. I think for something like this, it would be handy to invest in something like a Topaz Denoise AI to see if you could maybe help a little bit from there. Obviously, you can also look at in the details and see if maybe some of the noise reduction would be helpful here. However, you also introduce a softness with it, so it kind of would need a little bit of extra work. I think together, maybe a little bit of low local adjustments here and there, you know, with just a very small brush, seeing if you could maybe create a little bit more, you know, bring into the attention a little bit more of some parts and some of the lights would be just maybe something I would do. Also, you could do a little bit more of the vignette just to close the picture a little bit more to something like this. But in between two of them, Joseph, there is absolutely nothing wrong. They are both beautiful captures, great examples of different photography styles and macro styles, and you done well with both of them. So thank you for sending us your photos. If you have more, make sure you send them to us again for a next episode, and until then, take care. Moving on to the next photographer and second macro photographer, we have a Stevie, butterfly pictures. I wonder because obviously here in Europe right now is winter, except here in UK it looks more like a spring already. The butterfly pictures really starting to pop out now. We have a lots of bird pictures earlier in the year or at the end of 2021, and now we get lots of butterfly photos. So I wonder, maybe you can leave me in comments if those are pictures from now, or if you have captured them in the summer and now you got around to post-process them. Either way, they are both very, very lovely, and let's have a look at them in a little closer. So right here, let's have a look at the details of the image. See if we have any camera details right here. And looking at this one, it's Canon you were using 18 to 200 millimeters lens, and the settings were 400 ISO, 150 millimeters lens, f5.6, 1/640th of a second. So the shutter speed is quite good, and obviously keeping this nice and sharp. F5.6 with this lovely, almost like a bouquet-like background, I think works very well too. However, I think the ISO 400 with this 150 millimeters punch in really brings a lot of noise, and noise to the degree where when I look specifically at this part of the image, it almost starts to look like a watercolor. Now, when I would zoom in, you would get lots of pixels. I can see that you try to kind of solve it with probably, I don't know if inside of Lightroom or in another plugin. However, it's just a shame, and I wonder if there was a way of how you could lower the ISO all in all. Specifically also when you look at the background, you can really see lots of the noise there, but then once you start to look around the picture itself, it is visible there. Now, obviously, based on the camera and based on the gear you're using, each camera and each gear has a certain threshold, just like you know, and once you hit that, it's almost getting to the point where it's impossible to solve it in a post-processing afterwards. Now, different cameras, different settings. My Sony A7R Mark IV with the 24 to 105 lens, I am somewhere about 2500 on what I shoot, where I can still go in and pretty much help to it, where when you have a different lens and different camera, you can hit 600, 400, and you already can get to the point when it's a bit difficult to solve. But other than that, technically, I mean, my main focus here would be the ISO and the removal of the noise, because the rest is nice, the light is nice, the sharpness is nice, it's nice and crisp. However, I would be focusing on the ISO and the noise. Now on this one, let's see, a different camera. The lens, was it also this one? No, so this one is 55 to 250 millimeters, ISO 160, 250 millimeters, so really punch in, f5.6, 1/100th of the second. And when I zoom in, the butterfly compared to this one looks a little bit softer, and not the wings looks okay, but when I focus at this point, you see there is a little bit of softness in it, so just something to keep an eye on. Obviously much better with the ISO, although you get touch of noise anyway, but with that kind of zoom in, you would really want to go for 100 as much as possible. And yeah, that's where we are. Other than that, the setting is nice. I think you get a nice color. The light is nice as well, although some of the colors are a little bit washed out. And I think the main reason being is there is a lots of green, so the green start to kind of leak in the rest of the image a little bit. Still, a nice kind of blur and softness at the background there, creating really nice separation and lovely work with the contrast between the butterfly and the background. That brings me directly into the artistic review of the image. And I think when you have this main subject of the butterfly, and specifically when you do square crop, it's always good to crop directly onto the animal itself. So if I look this, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you keep the same amount of space on each side of the animal. So I'm looking at here and I'm kind of looking at here and trying to see if I could do the same. And then I'm looking at the top and the bottom and trying to see if I can do the same here as well. So something like this would be where I would start. And after that, I'm quite happy with it. The contrast again of the animal and the background works very well. Obviously it's all about the butterfly and I think you manage to capture that very well. Now moving on this one. Now this one is very, very lovely. The flow and the leading line towards the bird, towards the butterfly, the background being very blurry, which I think really helps in this case. The whole kind of centerpiece is this again. It's nice and balanced and it works. So Stevie, nothing to add here. It's a lovely, lovely picture. Now post-processing, in this case, I would be looking at ways how I could remove some of the noise. Also, I would lower the exposure just a touch and maybe add a little bit of the local adjustments. If you've done already, maybe even more to really bring most out of it and really bring the focus in. There is a little bit of vignette already, so I would leave it, and this is where I would go. The color is nice, the saturation is nice. It's very saturated, powerful, but still very believable. So well done there. Now on this one, I would definitely look at the white balance in the color and go for auto, and I wouldn't warm it up anymore, although maybe just a touch, but definitely you can see the before and after. Let me just remove the tint, how it's kind of helping the butterfly altogether. When I bring it back, you can see how the green actually leaked inside of the shades of the butterfly, and when I poke it to the 25, it really helps. Now again, I wouldn't go as far with the blue, but somewhere like this, I think would be really helpful. Another thing I think it would help on this one would be definitely vignette, bring in the focus on the actual animal. And then with a little bit of local adjustment and a brush, I would just highlight some part of the animal to navigate the viewer in the center of it. And that's about it. Stevie, well done. Lovely, lovely picture. Thank you very much for sharing with us. If you have more images, make sure you send them over. We would love to see them. And until next time, keep shooting. Moving on the next photography style, we're gonna look at portrait photographer. So we have an ad here and we have two images from you. Now they are almost like a travel documentary captures, very natural but very colorful. So let's have a look at them. Starting with this one, let's see if we get the camera details, and we do. So what do you do? Canon 5D Mark II as your camera, your lens was 24-105, and the settings were ISO 200, 80mm was your lens, f6.7, 1/90th of a second. Now that's pretty cool. So 200 ISO, so no additional noise. There is a little bit visible here, but nothing crazy. Now, little bit of post-processing. When I look at closer here, you can see again it's starting to look a little bit like a watercolor. So if that's what you are going for, I think it works. The rest of the setting is quite cool. There is a little bit of the movement on the hand. Again, it really depends what you are trying to capture, what effect you are going for, but the rest of it I think works pretty cool. What I like here really is the light being nice and diffuse. I think it really works. It creates some nice shadows, and most importantly, it creates a really nice and believable scene. All together, I think it's missing a little bit of a contrast, but technically, other than that, I think it's well handled. Now on this one, again, documentary-wise, I mean, there is lots of happening, obviously different people, different movement. When it comes to setting, you were on ISO 200, 32mm this time, so a little bit wider, f6.7, 1/45th of a second. So you're getting a little bit of movements on certain parts, which is completely normal, but the overall sharpness is really good. The light is again very interesting. It's very even, which I think helps, but in this one you get a little bit more shadows compared to the first one, and putting it together, it's a lovely, lovely capture. Where it's gonna bring me to the artistic feel, where I think these pictures are so much more about what's actually happening on them rather than the technical part. I think the technique is very important, but in this case, really, it's the composition which works. I think it's really, really cool. Obviously, storytelling is really happening here. Different people. It doesn't look staged at all, and it looks very believable, and it almost looks like a scene from a certain movie. Now, maybe I would have cropped these guys here because they are kind of half cropped, and really just focus on those two right here. So maybe doing something like this would create a different picture altogether, but that would be just me. It really is just an artistic decision. Now on this one, same thing. I wouldn't even crop it differently. I think it's quite cool. Your main subject is obviously the person, so you're focusing on it. It's almost in a center, a little bit off center, which is always a good technique. And all in all, I think it works very, very well. So both of them very good when it comes to artistic choice. Now, when it comes to post-processing, I think this one definitely needs a little bit of contrast to push it out. So we push the contrast, we bring down the exposure, and now with the help of local adjustments, we're going to work a little bit more with it. Start with vignette, close the picture a little bit more, and it already actually darkens some parts of the image. And then we can add a little bit of linear gradient from the side to add a little bit of darkness here. And we can do the same from here, just to close it even more. So that's where I would start. And then I would use a brush. So create new mask, brush, and maybe highlight some parts of the person. So to add a little bit more exposure to him. And maybe some of the items he's using around him. And then create another brush and actually lower the exposure and really just highlight everything around. Not as much, maybe just like this, and there you have it. So let's see before and after, and you can see how the contrast really makes a huge difference and how it really pushes the picture forward. Now, talking about this one, similarly, but probably a little bit better because there are different shadows. So you can again add a little bit of contrast to make it extra, bring down the exposure just a touch, and then you can really use a brush here and do different things here. So extra exposure on certain parts, here and here, and the opposite, minus exposure on the other parts. So something like this here, this here, this here, and the down here, and not that much, maybe less, but still creating a similar effect, creating contrast altogether. The vignette is always good start as well to kind of see where it's going to take you to bring something like this, and that's where I would leave it. Art, thank you very much for sharing your photos. It was lovely to see something a little bit different. All in all, it's a lovely captures, a very storytelling, a very kind of nicely saturated and very well done. So thank you and take care. Now, the next photography we're going to look at is a travel photography. So these are from Alan, and we're going to look at them. So there is a boy right down here, and then I'm assuming maybe it's the same boy just swinging on the tree. So let's have a look at it. Let's see if we have any camera details. And sadly, we don't. And I tell you what, Alan, there is lots of noise coming through on them. So just from what I can see, because normally there is a camera details here, when I zoom in, the boy is sharp, so I think that helps. Obviously the tree around him is sharp, so that's cool, but you get lots of noise. So it's like this kind of grain and mixed with color grain as well, and I think that really adds a lot of unnecessarily busy scene where the composition is quite nice. I think it works. Obviously the boy here, I think it would be helpful if you would have kept the ISO a little bit lower. I think another thing which would help would be to bring the f-stop down and create a really nice separation between the boy and the background. Now, talking about this one, again, the boy is sharp, so your shutter speed is fast. However, tons of noise. So you see when I zoom in, it almost looks like an old video game with lots of pixels and lots of work to be done. Unfortunately, with that amount of noise, there is really nothing much you can do. And specifically in these parts, when you look at it, it almost really melts together. It's starting to be really difficult to see. And that's the first thing I would suggest you to focus on, is to managing the ISO and managing the f-stops. Now, artistically, they are both very interesting. This is, I think, really working very well. It's a lovely panorama. It's very clever and it's very well done. Obviously, the boy with a nice contrast between the background, swinging. There is the kind of panorama, almost like a motion cinematic view, and I think it works. Now on this one, as a part of the whole series, again, it explains it, it's nicely done. If there would be the softer background, it would be again a little bit more cinematic and it would be very lovely. Now when it comes to post-processing, Obviously, you would need to see if you can remove some of the noise, which can be done in details to do the remove noise reduction. Then you can remove some of the color noise reduction. And then you could add a vignette to really focus on the boy and probably leave it from there. You can always double check the white balance as well. But other than maybe adding a little bit of tint, it's fine. Now, talking about this one, it's pretty much same settings. You would look if you can maybe add some noise reduction. The problem is that once you add too much of it, it starts to actually add some softness to the overall image. Then color noise reduction as well. And in this case, maybe almost, no, even in black and white, it's just way too noisy, Alan. So first thing you need to look at is your ISO and see how you can fix that. The rest of it, I think you have a really good guy for composition. The post-processing is quite balanced. However, with that much noise, it's really difficult then to start to work around with the post-processing. So have a look at that and see where you can take it from there. Alan, thank you very much for sending your photos over. It was a pleasure to see them, and make sure you send us more in the near future. And now to finish this week's show, we have 4 wildlife photographers. So starting with Faith here, we have 2 images to look at. So first of all, 2 birds. I assume they fight with each other with very nice and soft background, really nice contrast, very well down here. And this some kind of like a wild cow or something like that. I hope I'm saying it right. However, let's see on the details. So maybe it's called Mama Longhorn. I hope I'm right. Anyway, let's look at it. Starting with here. So this is Sony 7R Mark II, which used to be my camera. I used to love it. 24 to 240 lens, which I think, if I have to be honest, still have somewhere here. Again, one of my favorite lenses. Made a lot of money with it as well. Done lots of projects and used to love the lens. So love your camera. ISO 640, okay, 166 millimeters. So you will really zoom in. F9, 1/800th of a second. So really, out of these settings, first thing which obviously strike me is the ISO, high ISO. Specifically when it was a sunny day like this, you shouldn't have to go above 100 at all. So that would be my first thing. So with a picture like this, obviously you want to make sure that the animal stays sharp. So you want to make sure that you're managing the shutter speed and staying somewhere around 1/200th of a second, 1/250th of a second, somewhere around that touch. I don't think you need to go to 800th of a second, unless the animal was running away, but it doesn't look like that way. So that would be first thing. F-stop, I think for a scene like this, obviously with the 166 millimeters, you need to take that in consideration. However, I think F7 would again help in overall to then bring the ISO down to 100, which would help us to keep the sharpness in, which is still very decent. However, there is also a little bit of noise and it's mostly visible in the darker areas and in these kind of backgrounds. So that would be where I would take it from. After that, obviously the animal is sharp. There is quite nice soft background, which creates really nice depth. The light wasn't perfect. You get this really harsh shadow here and also on the animal, but all in all together, it's a lovely, lovely picture and technically quite well done. Now moving on, this one, it's the same camera and same lens? No, different lens. 200 to 600 millimeters. Now here the settings were 320 ISO, 600 millimeters, so really punched in. F6.3, 1/1000 of a second. Now this is a scene where I understand the high shutter speed because obviously they were in a high movement and it's well captured. And looking at the settings, I am assuming that ISO 320 is quite reasonable all put together. Now, some parts of the animals are sharp, so I think that works well. And I think the fact that there is a little bit of softness at their wings and so on just adds the overall feel of movement. So altogether, really cool. Now, let's talk about the composition and artistic. I think you've done super well capturing these animals in the movement. I think that looks really, really cool. So well done there. However, I would have cropped it a little bit differently. I think as they are the main subjects, you really want them on the center of attention. Let's say we're going to keep the same crop and I would go for something like this. Maybe more like this. Let's see. Yep, something like this or like this. They have still plenty of space inside, but you're centering them in a center to really bring the attention towards them. That also helps with the overall composition balance, which is brilliant. And I really love the contrast between the white birds and the background, together with the separation of the depth of field. I think well done on that. Now on this one, obviously it's a very, very nice animal. However, I would have also loved, just like on this one in the compression, I would love more space around it. Obviously the light isn't the greatest, so that doesn't help in the overall feel. It's a little bit flat. Everything is lit evenly except these really harsh shadows. So it's more a kind of documentary capture of the nice animal, but other than that, there is not really much happening there. So compare the two, where you have the movements here and the depth of field and all the contrast together. This one, between the two, I prefer the first one. Now, when it comes to post-processing, on this one, there is probably not much you can do. I think I would double check to make sure that everything is nice and straight. Double check your white balance as well, just to see. Obviously, it's really warm, so maybe just lower it down a little and maybe push the tint just a little bit right here and leave it from there. Obviously, to bring more attention towards animal, you can add a little bit of a vignette here and leave it from there. Now on this one, I wouldn't do nothing differently. Push the contrast maybe a little, add the vignette here to really bring the attention towards them and leave it. So Faith, this one is brilliant, loving the image. This one maybe needs a little bit more work, but most likely probably visit another day when the light is a little bit nicer and maybe leaving a little bit of space around them. So thank you very much for sending your photos over. It was a pleasure to review them for you. Take care and send us more pictures in the future. Moving on to wildlife photographer number 2, we have Ken. Ken, we have 2 more pictures. I know you sent us more, but I picked those 2 because I like them a lot and it's something to definitely look at. So starting with this one, lovely, lovely separation and contrast between the background and the animal. So let's have a look. Still using your Nikon Coolpix with your ISO 200, 270 millimeters, so really kind of punched in, f5.6, creating a really nice depth of field, and 1/500th of a second to make sure that everything is sharp. And sharp everything is, so well done there. It looks very, very cool. Actually, it's very nice composition as well. I like the whole bird. All in all, this is one of my more favorite picture of yours. I think it's very well handled. Now on this one, I really like it because of the contrast between the colors. I really love the bird. It's beautiful. It's all there, and the colors create a really nice composition here. We staying with the same camera, ISO 200, f5, 1/250th of a second. So again, we have a lovely texture, lovely sharpness, lovely light, and it's just lovely and managed very well, Ken, as always. Now, moving on the composition and the artistic feel, as I already talked about the contrast, I think that works really well. Now, as the bird is in that's what it's about. It's about the bird. I would probably just center him a little bit more to bring him in a center of attention. So maybe do something like this. We don't necessarily need to clip him on the top and the bottom, but I would do more something like this to take it from here and then leave it. Now on this one, the composition is great because it's all about the bird. Obviously the wood has to be there, or piece of tree, and really in the composition, in the contrast with the blue color, it's really nice and it works very well together. So composition wise, this is great. Staying with this image, talking about post-processing, I think all in all, it's nicely done. You know, I like to do a little vignette to bring more attention towards the bird. You can use some masking tool and brush to maybe add a little bit more contrast to certain parts of the image, but here you have it, nicely done. Now, talking about this one, pretty much a similar thing, vignette definitely, and masking with a nice brush and extra exposure to bring a little bit of attention towards the bird. And there you have it. Ken, pleasure as always seeing your images. If you have a moment, write us in the comments, how often do you go out shooting? Because you really send a lot of pictures. It's great to see them. Love what you're doing. So please make sure you keep sending us pictures in the future. And now the next photographer, we have a Laurie. Laurie, we have 2 images here. And here we go, doggies in a movement, lots of fun here happening. And then those are, I'm assuming it's like a lamp, or yeah, I think it's a lamp, or it's maybe a goat. Either way, very interesting capture. So let's have a look at what we have here. Now, let's have a look at the camera. So this one is Canon 5D Mark II. 70 to 300 millimeters lens, and the settings were ISO 100, 235 millimeters, so really punched in, f8, 1/400 of the second. So first of all, everything is sharp, everything what needs to be the main subject, so that's really well done. ISO 100, keeping everything nice and without any additional noise. And then f8 really creates a lovely depth of field, which I love. I really like this kind of separation where you have the foreground blurry and the background blurry, and then your main subject is in focus. I think that works really well here, and I really love this. Now, luckily there was some of these greens which actually help us with the contrast together, because again, and I think that's quite common in the area where you're shooting, that the animals have a very similar color towards their surroundings, which makes completely sense, because obviously they want to be as hidden as possible. So in this case, I think what really helps is these patches of green, because it brings the contrast out. So that's excellent. And now moving on this one and talking about your camera settings, again, Canon 5D Mark II, 70 to 300 millimeters lens, ISO 100, so perfect there. 100 millimeters, again, kind of punching on them, and they look like they're having lots of fun. I hope they were having fun. f7.1, 1/250th of a second. Now, the only thing is, I love what the animals are doing, and I love the movement in them. I think that's very well captured. Obviously, this dog very excited to chase the other one, which almost looks like he's turning around to look at him. Movement in the snow looks great as well. The only thing is, I think your fence is kind of falling aside to one side, so that's something what we can check in a minute. Other than that, the sharpness is nice, the light is quite pleasing, and it's a lovely capture, very storytelling capture, so I really like that. Now, composition, we can stay with it. I would probably crop it a little bit differently, but first let's have a look at the geometry and see if maybe the fence could be fixed for us. Let's see, what would it have to, something like this, maybe, and then really bring in the this thing out, maybe like this, and see if that would help. But no, it doesn't really. You probably have to look at it afterwards. I mean, you can try to use this thing if that would help us a little. Does it? Oh, it does maybe a little bit, yeah. So at least like this, to kind of have it straight, I think is handy. Maybe not, maybe this one. Let's see if we could just help to it a little bit. So maybe something like this. The cropping then, let's just put them in a center. So something like this, and there you have it. So I think that's really cool. So something like this, just to kind of work it out. Then moving on this one, I love the composition here. Obviously the animals on the third, I think is always a good thing to do. So just a little bit more, maybe something like this, but altogether it's again clear what it's about. The contrast is there, the depth of field is there, which really works, Laurie. So all in all, this is a lovely capture too. While we're here, let's talk about the post-processing. So just bringing down a little bit of light, I think would help. And obviously what we can do is some adjustments in like a local adjustment. I want to just double check the white balance, and actually there was not much change, so I think it's spot on. And with a little bit of brush and masking, I would just work on some magic here and see where that's gonna take us. So maybe just something like this. You know, I really like to add a vignette because I think it really can create a nice feel, and it can really bring the attention towards the animal. Now on this one, definitely a vignette to bring the attention towards them, and push the contrast a little bit, and maybe with the brush. Again, just kind of highlight them, knowing that they are the main subjects, to bring again more attention towards them. So there you have it. Laurie, thank you so much again for sending us your photos. It was lovely to see them, lovely to review them, and those two, I think they had a lots of fun. So I hope you also had a fun capturing it. Take care and send us more pictures in the future. And finally, we have a last photographer right here, Laurie. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Sometimes some of the names are a little bit foreign for me, but either way, we're going to focus on your images, which are very natural, but very lovely. This all right here is beautiful, almost kind of melting in the background because she's really hidden with her lovely feathers and lovely colors. And then the chipmunk here, or squirrel, on the top of the tree, again very similarly in the same colors as the surrounding. So now this is very documentary, natural like capture, which I think also works very well. In this case, what help us is the background, creating really nice contrast. And in this case, you need to take a moment really to find the bird, but once you find it, you can really look at it and enjoy the beautiful view. So let's have a look if we have the camera details here. And we have, so this was a Nikon D300, 18 to 270 millimeters lens, and then from the settings, ISO 400, 270 millimeters, so really pushed all the way through, f11, 1/500 of a second. So assuming that the bird was sleeping, I don't think you needed to be really that fast on the shutter speed. And with that knowing, obviously, I know it's always a kind of little bit of a worry that the bird will start to move and fly away and you will miss the chance. However, by bringing the shutter speed down a little, maybe staying somewhere around 250 or 300, it would also allow you to bring down the ISO and avoid any additional noise, which is a little bit visible on the kind of darker areas and the background. So that's just for the future. Obviously, the main goal is to stay around 100. However, it's still very cool. Now, the bird is sharp. There is a really nice light there. The contrast is nice as well, and I think technically it's very well handled. The only thing I would be looking at is the ISO and seeing how you can lower it a little bit. Now on this one, let's see, where we same camera, different lens. So in this case, it's again Nikon D300, Tamron this time 18 to 270 millimeters. You really like to punch in, that's funny. It's interesting also that both of them have the same length. So you probably have a camera with similar length. ISO 250, 270 millimeters, f10, 1/400 of a second. Where in this case, I totally understand the 1/400 of the second. Obviously f10 with the 270 millimeters to create a nice depth, which works very well here. I really love this foreground being kind of soft, and then the background as well. That creates really nice depth in the whole image. And ISO 250 isn't that bad. There is a little bit of noise maybe on the animal and again in the darker areas, but all in all, it's technically very well done. Again, very nice diffuse light, not creating any crazy shadows, so well done there. Now, post-process, artistic composition kind of point of the images. This is very lovely. I tell you the only thing I wish you would have more of the tail of the animal. I think it's always shame to crop them away, specifically when it's something like this, where obviously it's very visible that it's missing there. It's not like you just decided to crop a piece of his tail, right? So it's just something to keep an eye on. Also, the cropping could be a little bit tighter, I think, really just focusing on the animal and bringing him more in front. Other than that, the depth is really lovely. The background helped with the contrast and it's well handled. Now on this one, the depth is nice as well. Obviously the all being all in focus, then you have the nice blurry background. Shame for some of these elements, but that's how you can't really choose when you're shooting something like this, so it's still nice. I think the blue help us a little bit to create a depth and a contrast, and all in all, it's a lovely storytelling. I think similarly at the bottom, I wish you had a little bit more space, and that's maybe something you need to kind of look at when you're doing your composition. Always try to take a little bit of extra, so then you can crop it away rather than not taking it and then being sad that you missed on that. Now, when it comes to post-processing on this one, I would just help a little bit by using some of the gradients to maybe bring more attention towards the bird. So I would darken the background here, and similarly, I would darken this part here. So then not crazily, so it's not too visible, but a little bit anyway. Where is the other one here? maybe not that much, but something like this I think is helpful. And then using a brush, adding a little bit of exposure, I would bring some of the highlights on the animal out and leave it from there. Maybe a little vignette in the effects here, and there you have it. Now on this one, I think this one maybe need a little bit on vignette on him, which you can create by radial gradient, pointing it towards the animal, then inverting it and really just bringing down the exposure, and you kind of creating vignette, but just around the animal here. And that's about it. I really love it. It's very natural, very lovely. Both of the pictures are beautiful. Obviously, you have a really good eye and a really good patience to go out and look for them and capturing them. So you've done extremely well. Thank you very much for sharing your photos with us. It was lovely to review them. And I hope that maybe I can see more of your pictures in the future. And the same goes for all the rest of you folks. If you want to join us for the photography review show, all you need to do is to head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/review, and find all the upcoming dates, links, and information on how you can join us already next week for the next episode of a photography review show. Folks, thank you very much for joining me today. Take care, and until next time, keep shooting.